A couple weeks ago, Reddit user posted this map of the shortest distance between every point of interest on Kerbin, and I took that as a challenge, so I spent over 90 hours doing just that. Before we jump right on in, there are a few rules and allowances I want to cover. Firstly, quick saves are allowed. This is not a permadeath challenge. Secondly, launch sites are allowed in limited capacity. I'll explain later. And thirdly, only the Phileas Fogg family of vehicles can be used. Our all-terrain vehicle is named after the protagonist of Jules Vernes' 1872 novel Around the World in 80 Days, so that should give you an idea of the epic expedition we are about to embark on. So it all starts here at the KSC launch pad. Langer Kerbin, our intrepid pilot and helicopter pilot for the mission, takes, even though it looks like there's nobody in the seat, he is indeed flying this. Getting ready. Taking the first part of our journey, officially starting the countdown. It is year 10, day 2 of our Around the World challenge. Joining him will be Valentina Kerbin as the mission commander. He is, of course, the mission pilot. Henbrett is our engineer. And we have 2 scientists, Poduki and Carwin. Bunch of interesting names here. This is technically part of the KXP series, however not really considered part of the playlist. But in that, we haven't quite gotten to the episodes yet, but we did manage to get Valentina, Bill, and Jebediah back home from Midmiss, so a little bit of spoilers there. But anyways, this is the Phileas Fogg V3. Versions 1 and 2 weren't capable of completing the mission, so they are just obsolete here. This one, however, will have some problems with the robotics. It worked in all my test flights, and it worked here, but eventually I will run into some problems, which will require a redesign. Like I mentioned, redesigns are allowed at launch sites in a limited capacity, as long as we keep our vehicle an all-terrain vehicle, meaning land, sea, and air capable, and it keeps the general design of this. It will be within the Phileas Fogg versions, and we go through a couple different versions as we go along. So we get our Kerbals loaded into the craft. We are using the A set. I can't remember the exact name, but all the mods are in the bottom in the description below. But the A set cockpit with the feline rover Lynx body for the rest of it, including the wheels. And we are using the moist mod to use our liquid engines, or our oceanic engines. So now that the music's calmed down a little bit, let me say thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching. This is the biggest endeavor that I've done so far. Like I mentioned before, I literally spent 90 hours recording all this footage, and that's not even to mention how much it took to put it all together and edit it and plan and all sorts of challenges along the way. But I'm excited. We are officially loaded up into our vehicle, taking our first steps. And our scientists, throughout this whole entire journey, are always very apprehensive. They do not like the fact that we drive so fast. They don't like the fact that they can't see where we're going. So they are always going to be a little bit on edge. Valentina and Henbrett, however, are 100% badasses, so they're going to be giddy the entire way. But with that, we have reached our first checkpoint, which is Monolith 1, the one that you can see from the launch pad. Easy enough. As you saw on the bottom, I included the name of the checkpoint along with the latitude-longitude coordinates. So if you ever want to try this journey out on your own, you can follow along by copying down those. I'll probably include a document somewhere in the description that has all the sites listed. So real fast before we get started, we're going to head over to the island airfield, and as we do that, we're going to take a look at that map that we took a peek at in the beginning. Now this is the map that no user selected created. Obviously, you didn't create the map, but created the lines, the shortest distance between each one of the points of interest, launch sites, and anomalies. Now, he listed them in this direction that I'm going right here, going west first, south, then east, then north. However, after looking at the journey quite a bit, I made the decision to reverse it, and I'm going to go north first, east over here, south down through these parts, and then north again, west, and then come back through here, go through the desert as my last point, and then come home here. This will give me the advantage because I will be spending most of my time going west, which means that my days will be as long as possible because the sun will be at my back as I go. That's going to become much more important later, but for now we're going to be traveling north, so the angle of the sun's not going to matter that much. We are using Waypoint Manager to keep track of our destinations, and that gives us the real-time estimate of how long it will take given our current speed. And as you saw there, it's going to take at least an hour and a half, given at the rate that we're going now. That doesn't even take into consideration that we are going to be doing some water travel. So this is going to be a journey. I want you to take a quick note here and look at how hesitant I am to allow my craft to go over 15 meters per second. It's nothing really important now, but it will become hilarious later with how fast we end up going. I mean, look at this. I'm just so nervous and paranoid about hitting this water too fast. So I just want to I'm just like tapping on the brakes. But we safely touch down in water, thusly proving our capability of water travel. With our engines in tow, we have to really be careful with how much power we give it because these engines have the ability of flipping us entirely, going so fast that it launches us out of the water, which is no good. So we're only going to have about half fuel on here. But I will find out later, and we will have to do a lot of balancing, but these engines are not balanced. For some reason, it always likes to push to the left. So we're going to eventually have to find the right balance between thrust from the left and right engines. Now, one of the mods that I'm using is Environmental Visual Enhancements, which gives the water this kind of texture and wave function. But as you can see here, it is brutal on my craft. It was so hard. I'm time warping here up the footage, but as you see, I was on the keys the entire time. There's no way I can just kind of let this autopilot. So we are going to change that. I did some searching online, figured out how, but I wanted to get my craft out of the water before I did, just so that way nothing happened to it, which meant that I had to spend about 45 minutes to an hour fighting those waves just to get here. I wasn't going to allow myself to I didn't want to reload from before I entered the water just to fix it. I wanted to push forward and, you know, prove that I could handle some challenges along the way. As we kind of came up here, there was no real good way to enter the island airfield, so we did smack up our nose cone, but that's not a problem because we are at our first airfield, which means that we can replenish our craft. So I explained earlier that we're going to have limited usage of launch sites, and what that means is that at any launch site or airfield that we discover along our way, we can recover our craft, recover our Kerbals. We can redesign our craft if necessary. If not, we can just rebuild it, refuel it, and we can only launch it from any launch site or any airfield that we have discovered thus far. We can't, even though we know of the island launch site from the beginning, we can't just launch ourselves there because so far in the journey we had not yet discovered it. So we are now heading towards the Cove launch site. And as you can see here, I can't skip the journey on the water and just bring myself to the Cove launch site as per our rule. And then the second part of that I wanted to mention is that if we do any redesigns, it must stay within the Phileas Fogg family and do basically the same thing. Those ferns, or not ferns, those underwater seaweed bits are from the Parallax 2, as well as those trees off in the distance. Honestly, Parallax 2 and Blackrack's volumetric clouds made this journey so much more enjoyable. The fact that we had some sort of visual scatter along the way kept us from losing our minds just traveling on flat green hills with flat blue sky. Kept things nice and interesting. Anyways, we talked through, but here we are at the Cove launch site. This is the first one along our journey that you don't know right off the bat in stock KSP. So now I'm taking a look at the map and seeing just how gargantuan of a task I have ahead of me. For the next checkpoint, I have over twice the distance between both checkpoints that I've gone so far. And in those checkpoints, I only had to travel over water. Now I will be traveling over land throughout the entire time. I am going to be narrating a little bit less towards the end of the journey, towards once we've started doing things a little more habitually. But as we start off, I want to kind of explain my thought process, the way that we handle certain things, and where we're going from here. So now, fast forward a little on our journey, and we are now in the lowlands, highlands, meadows. I'll lose track of all the different biomes that we come into, but there are a lot of different changes here that are quite nice to look at. Here I've got my two scientists in our external command seats. Those command seats are from the ECSIVA mod. It's not available on CCAN, so if you want that, you're going to have to look it up and install it manually. Here I accidentally hit EVA instead of transfer on Carwin, and she fell out while we were going at speed, but thankfully she was flexible enough that she didn't hurt herself too much, so. I turn on the scan surface finders from the Breaking Ground DLC because I wanted to find myself a baobab, and with Parallax adding all those trees, the Breaking Ground features are a bit harder to find. And so typically, if you're on Minmus or if you're on Kerbin or wherever you are, it's suggested that you turn that on. That's in the debug menu. However, I'm gonna run into so many freaking baobabs this entire time. I end up turning it off immediately, and we are never gonna be short of baobabs. Langer's face right there was one of concern. Langer is not a badass, so he does not have the same thrill-seeking nature that Valentina and Henbrit do. So now the sun is starting to set on our first day, and we are coming through some hilly ground. It's difficult to drive at night, so we are going to go ahead and let the sun set. Keep an eye on those gorgeous clouds. We are running out of fuel, so we are going to mount our first secondary mission. I know that sounds weird, but our first refueling mission. And how we're going to handle this, because I can't just pilot every single craft. So we are going to use the Rove mod in the description below. But the rover brain can be attached to a vehicle and autopilot any craft most places on any celestial body. And so it took a little bit of work, but I was able to get this craft to rendezvous with where our Phileas was, and it is now transferring some fuel over. And while we're at it, we're gonna get our engineer. I forgot who we are doing today. I guess it's Bill. Yep, still Bill. We eventually will hire more Kerbals to assist us in our journey, and we're gonna have to have multiple refueling missions at various parts along the way, so that way the Phileas Fogg doesn't have to wait too long. So another part of my rules is that if it is a vehicle that's not the Phileas Fogg, I can use the rover brain to pilot it and get it where I want to go in the background. But if it is a Phileas Fogg vehicle, then it must be piloted by hand, by me, with a Kerbal inside. It cannot be controlled by a probe either. So that just kind of adds to our journey. It adds to a little bit of challenge to it. It will become relevant at some point. So, but it was one of the rules that I made in the beginning, is that even though I have the ability to just kind of like set my autopilot and then be like, all right, well, go ahead and I'll meet you at the next monolith, and then go do something else, come back, and it's like, oh, hey, Valentine and the gang are at the monolith. And that's not going to be part of this challenge. I'm now in the meadows. This is the meadows, and I like to call this Window XP Simulator because it is very much, we're in a foresty part, but later there's a lot more space between the trees. It's just very familiar. But anyways, this is our first obstacle. We realize there is a mountain pass in our way, but we find this nice little semi-low yet still hilly throughway, and we're going to take our first detour around. I didn't do very much test. I tested the vehicle, but I did not test the route very much. I didn't go to any of the places to see if my vehicle could handle it. I didn't test, what the terrain was like in between. I only tested around the KSC and the water to make sure that it worked. And I did a lot of tests. I'm not even including the testing in that 90 hours. I was probably at least, I would say, 6 or 7 more hours on top of that. Just doing the testing, getting the helicopter right. I had to ask questions on Kerbal Academy because I was just not wrapping my head around it. Thank you to all those people who did let me wrap my head around it, because this is partly in thanks to you. But anyways, we are now cruising quite fast down the hill, and just wanted to note back to that moment where 15 meters per second was really freaking me out. We are now passing through a thunderstorm because Blackrack's volumetric clouds adds for rain, and I just want to take a second and just listen to the sound of that cabin, the rain hitting. It's just beautiful. Yeah, it was the sights and sounds of this journey really made it worth it. There were a lot of times when I was kind of concerned about my progress. I was concerned about the ability of my craft, about my ability as a player, whether or not I could actually even achieve this challenge. But along the way, being able to see different beautiful areas, to travel through rainstorms and hear that beautiful sound really kept me sane. So I recommend visual mods if you're going to try this. Here we have Kerbin, another 100% badass. She's an engineer who wanted to balance out the crew. There were 2 pilots, 2 scientists. She demanded that there be 2 engineers, so she left the refueling mission that she was assigned to and joined the rest of them. And she's going to be a great addition to our crew. I was a little nervous at first. I'm like, do we need another person? That's just one other person that we could risk. What if she's no good? But her stupidity level is fairly low. Her courage is through the roof. And like I mentioned before, according to our digital machines, she is 100% badass. So she's going to be in the main cockpit for the majority of the ride. She's going to be able to see exactly where we're going. And it's going to be nice to see the little portraits down below of Valentina, Henbrit, and Zabriskie just loving life this entire way. Makes me happy. But anyways, we are at our first real checkpoint. I don't really consider the island airfield or the Cove launch site real checkpoints yet because it took very little to travel to them. But here we are at monolith number 2, and that's when I realized it is a very good thing I brought an aerial vehicle, because there's literally no way we can drive up that mountain to get to it. So I wasn't expecting to use this helicopter until even after the North Pole. This was supposed to be for Kerbin's highest peak, but we are going to be using it right off the bat. However, we are going to wait till morning because I am not sure how much battery is going to be required for this journey. Get to see Minmus up there. That's nice. That's distant object enhancement mods that allows you to focus on the planets and see which one they are. But yeah, anyways, I didn't do testing to see how high this helicopter could go. I flew it around, but I didn't do any kind of like limits testing, so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not we have enough battery to power us the entire charge, if we can even lift ahead of it. Like, I took a really big gamble right here. You know, it was far enough into the journey that I honestly couldn't justify starting over. By this point, I have already spent at least 7 hours, 8 hours maybe, because it was just such a huge distance between the Cove launch site and here. So, you know, all my eggs in a basket. Let's undock this helicopter and let's see if it can make it. So Langer Kerbin, once again, is not visible as due to the particular command seat we are using, but that particular command seat is the only one we can use, so unfortunately you cannot see him, but he is there, as you see in the little profile picture in the bottom right. I thought about landing him softly so I can do a quick save, since it was a fairly good takeoff. However, landing is not a gimme. It is fairly dangerous. We might as well just use the safety of being in air, because otherwise we may risk not even being able to get up in the first place. So we're just gonna climb, no quick saves. If we have to reload our save, then we'll have to go through the whole process of undocking, and that I think we even have to go through the whole process of transferring all the Kerbals around. So let's try to get this right. I'm very happy to see that it is lifting. It is just kind of climbing the terrain a little bit more. When I flew it in the test flights, you know, I flew it off the runway at the KSC, so there was nothing to really climb up. So it went straight up, but eventually, you know, it will probably reach its limit. But by kind of following the path of this, it's always keeping the terrain below us, only so far below us. Here I'm using my joystick because initially I was told, and in my practice I kind of noticed that it was easier to fly with the joystick. However, later in the video we will be flying mouse and keyboard as well. Look at that. I'm 4,000 meters above the surface and above sea level, so I have less doubt. I'm more certain that this can handle Kerbin's highest peak. That was going to be the ultimate question. I was kind of happy to see this mountain peak in the way, because it gave us an opportunity to test this helicopter and its abilities, because Kerbin's highest peak is 6,000 something, and so if we couldn't make 4,000, then we would have to redesign this helicopter, and probably pretty quickly. But thankfully not. We do a little crew report above the mountains, but it's a little bit useless. We end up coming back to the mountains again anyways, but nonetheless we grabbed a little science. Here I go in for a landing to do a quick save, and as you saw, not always the easiest approach. So I did get a quick save in there, so thankfully if anything happens down here I can reload. I'm not going to reload everything. There are certain things that I am going to allow through, but honestly, I wasn't trying to do a permadeath series with this. I want to complete the mission, and sometimes that requires you to figure out the best approach to a problem and go with that. So a few times I'll quick save, fewer times I'll quick load, but for the most part we make it through our journey. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that we successfully make this journey, because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, and we go through quite a bit of stuff, a few challenges, a few hiccups, some edge of your seat moments. I'm actually really happy with how this video came out. I'm super excited, but I'm not going to talk it up anymore. Here we are flying past monolith number 2. It made me realize that not all locations are going to be in a place where we can kind of land and get ourselves situated, get our Kerbals out for posterity. So I think flying by is good enough. We want to see, we want to get eyes on every single point of interest, every monument, every anomaly, but we don't need to take surface samples from it. This is just a see if we can do it. Anyways, the easy part is done. Now comes the rest. We have to make it back up the mountain and land our Kerbal safely aboard his craft. I never had very much luck in the process that I was hoping to do, which is to use this docking port underneath to reconnect with the craft. As try as I might, I was just not good at the precision landing that it required in order to connect those two, which is why we have that massive robotic arm on top. And that is, the goal is that we can land next to the craft, use that, and precisely place it onto the docking port where it needs to go. So, anyways, Langer is having a lot of fun piloting this thing, getting the hang of it, and doing some fast downhill maneuvers. Doesn't have a very good visual on where he needs to go until he gets low enough. I turn on the heads-up display to see if I can get an eye on it, to see if I can get an icon, but I ended up spotting it before I see any kind of square around it. It's good that the brake lights come on, and I had that little red marker to spot. But coming down softly, trying his best to keep as straight as possible, while also trying to lean towards the craft so it doesn't have to drive very much. And with that, the maiden voyage of our tiny little helicopter, the Minicopter 1, has concluded. So now, with everybody else aboard, we are going to utilize this arm to put the helicopter back in place. I said we're going to utilize this arm, and we're going to put that helicopter back in place. I said we're going to utilize this arm. Click through blocker, clear inputs. We're going to utilize this arm, and we're... Okay, so we are not going to be utilizing this arm. I don't know what happened. Throughout every test that I ran, I was able to control these robotics with no problem, but out here in the field, that is not the case. So this is a huge obstacle right now because we need to have a helicopter. I don't know if North Station 1 is going to have any kind of altitude, and now that I'm seeing how rocky the area is, it really might. And the next launch site we have is the Glacier Lake launch site, which is past Kerbin's highest peak. So there's a chance we're going to need helicopters at least twice before we can even redesign our thing. So I decide to switch up the mission a little bit. We are going to not redesign, but we are going to send a replacement craft. But before we can even think about any of that, let's get Langer Kerman out. We're going to plant a flag here as kind of a reminder for everyone else later on for the Historical Society to come grab this helicopter because it's part of this expedition and should be remembered. So he goes ahead and plants a flag, naming it the Minicopter 1, misspelling copter, that is, and gives his thoughts on it, you know, for the people to come back and read. But yep, this is showing me that we are far from perfect, and we are going to have to think on our feet throughout this journey because there's no such thing as a sure thing on an expedition like this. There is a thing of keeping your brakes on, Valentina. That was kind of your job. So if any damage happened to that you know what? It's fine. Nobody needs to know. So before we can hit our next checkpoint, we are going to have to take a slight detour and head over to the shoreline, because that is going to be the easiest place to rendezvous with the replacement craft. Like I mentioned before, I can redesign, refuel, and rebuild any of our crafts at any of the launch sites that we've discovered thus far. Unfortunately, the launch site that we've discovered thus far that is closest is the KSC. So we will be mounting that journey in a little bit, but for now, let's get our intrepid heroes a little bit closer to their next venture. Quite a few lovely views. Quite a few scary hills. Those dark brown spots can cause you to go very fast and really increase your top speed. Top land speed that we ended up achieving in this was about 59.5 meters per second, which is very fast. I believe that is somewhere to the tune of 100 miles per hour. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the chat. But anyways, here we are. We are going to make our first redesign, and that is to get rid of that arm entirely. We're going to readjust our side seats, and the biggest change we are going to do is we are going to add a second helicopter here. There's a chance we're not going to be able to recollect those helicopters, so let's just have two for the two places we need. We're going to add a little extra fuel on there just so we don't have to refuel as many times as we have been. And we are going to lastly throw a claw on the top of it as a way to potentially reattach one of the helicopters. However, we're never going to use it. And then add a fuel cell. We're going to kind of go over all these changes again just in a few seconds. I just recorded the footage, might as well just kind of go. But the main point of this is we are going to hire two new Kerbals, Billy Bobsell and Bearmone. I don't know how he pronounces, but these are going to be our intrepid pilots who take the Phileas Fogg V4 and bring them to the main crew. So as you see, pointing at the arm, pointing at the fuel cells. Fuel cells are a way of generating electricity using liquid fuel and oxidizer. So you trade off your rocket power for electricity, and that is going to be crucial in the Arctic towards the North Pole, where sunlight is a bit more scarce. So rather than following the exact same journey that our heroes just did, because that was honestly very stressful and very long, we are going to go around the continent in the water, because the water is much safer. And also, you may have noticed, I forgot to mention it earlier when we were leaving the island launch site, but I did actually change the EVE settings so that way our waves are much more manageable. As much as I would have loved the realism of choppy waves out to sea, there was no way my sanity could last all that time. Literally, without time warp, this would have taken days sometimes to travel to different places that we needed to go to. And it was just because of the fact that I could safely time warp while in the ocean that managed to make things a little better. There were a lot of storms out at sea, made for nice IVA modes. And it was around this time that I realized that I actually had a ScanSat. I had ScanSat mod installed, and I actually had a satellite that was already in orbit scanning. And so it took me a little bit to figure out the right way to do it, because I didn't like the way that the IVA raster prop monitor handled the map. It didn't show us our exact location. It didn't update thoroughly enough. But this little thing in the sidebar was exactly what I needed and was perfect. The best part about it is it had a waypoint marker, so when you have waypoint finder mod, you can just simply name something, drop a little point, As you saw there, it appeared on our screen, and now we can select it. So now I'm no longer headed toward the shore. I can safely guide my my navigation on the fly using real-time data of not just the visual map, but the altimetry of it as well, which will come into play as the hills become more aggressive. I mean, that's the best way to explain it, is those hills are against us. Yeah, we got to pilot our way through some nice storms, and thanks to the ScanSat mod, we were able to travel through the night by our instruments alone. So now we have to go through this little strait here, and we need to be very safe because it's a small distance, and if we travel at night, we're not going to be able to see a shore until we hit it. So let's take this nice and easy, and then we're going to meet up with them some here, either the bottom or the top. I can't remember, but we'll figure it out when we get there. Some parts of this journey were mind-crushingly, soul-crushingly long and slow, but some of them were pretty nice and relaxing. Like, during this time, I was able to just kind of, watch a few things online, check my phone. At some point during this whole journey, I picked up a subscription to Masterclass and started learning new skills and whatnot. Not sponsored in any slight, but just having something to watch for the 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day that I was pulling trying to get this footage done kept me sane. And so certain parts were pretty easy, easier than others. Parts like this where I'm driving down hills, not easy, very stressful. My heart was racing half this journey, and just palm sweaty. Just it was a journey. I broke a bunch of stuff off my craft, but none of it is necessary. We are about to replace our craft anyways, so I just decided to keep going. Like I mentioned before, I'm not going to take every single quick load opportunity. Like, I only broke, some nose cones and some headlights, so no point in quick saving. We'll take our failure sometimes. But here we are, the two crafts meeting on the water. They have no way of transferring fuel or anything. This isn't a refueling mission. This is simply bringing them a new craft. Valentina takes the first steps out, swims through the water, and joins the Phileas Fogg V4. If you're wondering how you can get the IVA mode for both inside and outside the cockpit, that is free IVA for inside, and that is through the eyes of the Kerbal for the outside view. I find them staples, just must-haves if you're playing any kind of IVA. And then here we are, having Bearmone do his best at reattaching some lights and stuff, different pieces to give them. And then they're hanging out with each other in the cabin while they get to watch the main crew sail away. So here we are back on the water. We are going to use this to bypass a lot of the bad terrain that we would have had to go through had we not met up with them and gotten a new craft. So now I had to do some quick maneuvering because I was not expecting these icebergs in our way, and at that moment we were graced by a visit from the Kerbal gods to give us a sign that we were on the right path. For those of you who are not familiar, that is a little bit of a bug, a little bit of a lore, a little bit of a mythos. But we went and broke our headlights, which is not a concern because that was just our lower headlights. Nothing worth crying over. So we go ahead, use our rockets to kind of push ourselves up the hill. We have plenty of journey to go left. As you can see, we are only reaching the 40-minute mark now. And this is quite... I try to keep everything as concise as possible. I honestly wanted to make this as short as I possibly could with everything that I had. But once again, 90 hours of footage. Oof. Anyways, we found the second possible scannable feature from the Breaking Ground DLC out here in the mountains, and it's this gigantic crystal thing. So from this point on, we're not going to need the robotic arm, but it'll stay with us in our journey for a while. But yeah, getting some good science from here. And we have the largest arm available, so that means we gather the whole 100% of science. I end up gathering quite a bit along this journey, and for one of the later redesigns, I ended up needing to unlock a part via science and spent like almost all of it. It was ridiculous, but I am going to try to get the craft files up on Kerbal X. If anybody is interested, you can find them there. Possibly, I'll put in the description a link to them if they end up going live. But if you end up using these crafts on your own gameplay, just know that they're going to come with some issues. Like this one in particular, the two helicopters being so close together meant that the helicopter blades stuck. So once I undocked, it was a bit of a challenge to get myself off. And as you see here, we are now on our back. Thankfully, I thought about this potentially happening when I designed the minicopter in the first place, and I included these little robotic arms on them to kind of help push ourselves up. I did not attach them to any kind of CAL controller because honestly, I just don't know how to use them appropriately in this fashion, but through some finagling of the CAL controller, or of the robotic parts, I was able to fix it. And then the second part I ran into is my CAL controller was completely erased. Both of them had no information on them, so I had to re-put in all that information to make sure that my helicopter could fly. And then when I was happy with it, I did my best attempt at a takeoff. Not the best, but certainly not the worst. I am now upright. I got my arms back down, and they're back in place. I have my, I didn't mention this before, but the two blinking lights on there are indicators that the reaction wheel and the SAS are on, respectively, because I found, I'm not the best at making helicopters, but I found that having both a reaction wheel and SAS are crucial. You can't substitute one for the other or have only one. So for this helicopter, that's what those mean. But here we are, approaching our next checkpoint. This is one of the comm towers that keeps all of our little satellites connected. Once again, all we need to do is a flyby. Those little flashes you see on the screen, the clouds, they kind of get like a little outline or whatever. That just happens when I'm taking a screenshot. There's no workaround from that, unfortunately, but that's just what that is, in case anyone's wondering. But here I am. I need to get back to my craft. I did leave a bit earlier in the morning than I wanted. I always worry about not having enough sunlight to power my solar panels. But nonetheless, we have enough battery to make it back to our craft without a problem. So now it's just a matter of descending and landing. So go ahead and descend, Langer. Yeah, that's you get your landing gears out. That's good, but you need to like start going down, all the way down. Not you're only rising. That's not what we need to do. I mean, if you can figure out some way of getting back down to the surface, you should probably start your engines. Yeah, Langer. Oh no, Langer. And that is why Langer is our helicopter pilot. He is the only one of our group who could manage a daring feat like that. I'm so happy that we didn't kill him. That would be one of those things where I would not restart. If we had made that entire journey, we had made the majority of that flight. There's no way I could really feel justified in quick loading that. That's not an error of the game. That's not a bug. That is piloting error, and that would be on me. So if Langer had died, that would have been it for him. Speaking of which, another Kerbal fell out of the side seat trying to get himself back into the cockpit. But thankfully, we weren't going fast enough that he was in too much of a danger of spaghettifying, but he did flop around a little bit. Anyways, now we're still in the Highlands, but we're in the foresty area of it, and we are now approaching the northern tundra. There's a fun little sequence of biomes right over there, including a tiny little square of cold ocean. So I didn't get the chance to visit it, but that little location exists on the map if anybody is curious about it. I would love to see what's there, so let me know if you ever end up exploring it. But anyways, we are set on our next destination, which is solely named Mystery Site. The crew doesn't know what's there, but in the planning of this mission, that was always a goal in mind. So we'll figure out what it is when we get there, but we have quite a bit of tundra to travel through. And we're actually going to be traveling on the ice caps, which is nice. As you see here from the altimetry meter and the biometer, the area is completely level, and we should have no problem traveling across it. And the completely level part is very nice because I can time warp, I can physics warp our way along, which doesn't save any travel time on the journey, but it saves me personally like gameplay time, and that is priceless at this point. So we're going to go ahead and readjust our side seat so it's a little less dangerous. And we're also going to put one on the back. No idea the danger level of that, but now we have different views that we can do. And I particularly like this back one, just seeing the world pass behind us. And the top one's going to be very useful because we'll be able to see the kind of IVA that we do on the inside here, but without all the cluttering of our vision. We come across this strange little feature. This isn't on the map or the list or anything, but they start to question the reality of things when they see a tear in the fabric of space-time. But also, speaking of which, look at that gorgeous scatter and terrain of, I believe that's from the Parallax that causes this rockiness, and gorgeous. But here we are, approaching the mystery site. Early evening. Many, many days into our journey. And a deafening hush falls over all of them as they see what it is that they came to. Crew all has mixed reactions. Valentina, happy with their photo of posterity, decides that she is going to head back to the craft. She's going to be the first one, and the rest of them will follow. She turns her backs on them, keeps her eyes on way ahead, but then decides to look over her shoulder. She's pretty sure that they haven't gone anywhere. She's pretty sure that in the time that she took her eyes off them, nothing happened. She enters her craft, sits down at her seat, buckles up, and wonders, those are the same Kerbals I left with, right? Surely. Now comes the long trek to the North Pole. And getting electricity out here will be a little bit of a challenge, as there never is any real sunrise. It just circles around you. But through the night we can travel, we can speed our way there. And when they arrive, they see Bill and Jeb, their refueling craft, waiting at the site. Valentina is furious. Bill and Jeb are happy. They're excited to see another soul. They've been sitting here for quite a bit, but Valentina feels that they owe her. They stole something from her. But nonetheless, it is always good to see fellow Kerbals in this world, because Kerbals are explorers at heart, but they're also social creatures that need to explore together, need to tell everybody of what they found. So Valentina goes ahead and plants a flag at the North Pole, or close enough to it anyways, and goes ahead and transcribes her inscription. So Jeb and Bill hop back into the refueling truck and goes and gives them all the fuel they can. Zabriskie rolls around in the snow and gives people nightmares. Then comes time to set up the science lab. So we get Carwin out of her back seat, and then suddenly, before anyone can realize, tragedy strikes. That is right. Carwin Kerman somehow got herself wedged underneath the tire and was killed immediately. There was nothing that the crew can do. Nobody could save her. They can't stay here forever, otherwise they will all meet the same fate. So they plant a flag in her honor and unfortunately leave her buried in the snow. But she will not be forgotten. She will be accompanied by all the science experiments that the KSC has to offer, and her place of passing will be a place to visit for Kerbals all throughout the future. Very solemnly, the crew bids farewell to Bill and Jeb, says they'll see them at the next refueling point. Hopefully that won't be very long, but at the same time, hopefully they don't have to do it too much. So now they are leaving the North Pole and officially headed to the Eastern Hemisphere and into the second third of their journey. After a long time traveling through the tundra, very boring flatland the entire time, we just skip ahead to get back into grasslands area. Get a nice little peek at Eve there. We get Zabriskie Kerman out to take apart the helicopter because we are now approaching the highest peak of Kerbin, and we are going to need to lighten this helicopter as much as possible. We don't need landing gears. We're not going to be stopping off there. We don't need a ladder because we're not going to be climbing down. We don't need these lights. We don't need a good portion of this helicopter. So we're going to try to strip down every piece possible. So that way we can utilize the battery as best as possible, because we don't want to go to the foothill of the highest peak exactly. There is a place that is a little bit farther away from the peak. However, it's closer to the shoreline of our next goal. And by kind of meeting in the middle there, we can be most efficient with our travel. So we're going to go ahead and travel there. This is that waypoint that I pointed there. As you can see, it's very close to that lake to the right. However, the highest peak is the white part to the bottom, so this is kind of our compromise. So Langer will have a lot longer of a flight to do this time, and therefore the battery usage needs to be well thought out. And the solar panels, we extended a little bit farther to the side to hopefully get better exposure, but we shall see how that goes when we get there. So as you can see here, we are definitely at the foothills of the entire summit. We're going to be going up the peaks in ascending order, from the lowest peak to the medium peak to the higher peak to the highest. Like I mentioned before, the highest peak is somewhere around 6,000, 6,700, somewhere around there. And so as you can keep an eye on the altimeter there, you can kind of see how high we are above the ground. It was actually a lot of fun piloting helicopters. I hadn't ever done it before attempting this challenge, and so I essentially had to learn it for this challenge, but I may need to start including helicopters or rotary planes propeller planes, prop planes in my series going forward. I definitely learned a lot in this challenge. This was, it hit me in ways that I wasn't expecting, and I had to deal with certain things on the fly that I had never had to, deal with before. And in all honesty, in other missions, I would possibly be like, nah, this didn't work very well. I'm just gonna, I'll restart the mission. We'll try again, I only wasted half an hour. What's a half an hour? I'll just start the launch all over again. But with a challenge like this, you can't just start it all over again. It's not that easy. That's why I gave myself the ability to redesign my craft, because I knew there was going to be things that I wouldn't know going into it. I wouldn't know that I would need to be more capable of air flight than I had anticipated along this journey. That the air aspect of it became a much larger role than I was anticipating, and so I needed to be able to adapt to that. Now I know the original kind of feeling of a journey like this would be like, oh, the same craft from start to finish, you go along that way. However, I just kind of wanted to see the world, I wasn't, like I mentioned, I wasn't looking for a permadeath challenge or anything. If anybody does want to do this as a permadeath challenge, I highly recommend trying it. It was a lot of fun. I would imagine that would be an even greater challenge, and if you do it, please let me know, tag me in it. I would love to see that. And it's just, I would love to see anybody attempt this challenge, because this was fun, and I'd like to see how you approach the solutions to these challenges. I definitely recommend watching this video fully so you can get an idea of what the journey will entail, and then design something great. I would love that. I would probably recommend designing a VTOL as opposed to a helicopter. I feel like that would make an easier journey. I'm not skilled. I don't know how to make it. So I'm not even going to say I'm not skilled at it. I don't know how to make VTOLs. So if that is something that you know how to make, I think you would have a much easier time. I don't know about much easier, but you'd have an easier time at this challenge because you can at least time warp when you're flying. But anyways, that being said, we have a helicopter, so that is what we will have to deal with. And currently, we have a helicopter that is running out of battery quite quickly. I was at a high altitude because I was hoping to cover as much ground as possible, but I am at too high of an altitude to try to land with the battery that I have. So the best thing I can do is try to balance out the energy that I still have. I do have some reserves in both the probe core as well as my seat, so I try my best to, well, I guess not my best because I'm wasting some time right here, but I definitely try to access the probe core to transfer that power into my batteries, but I just waste a lot of time and I don't get into it quick enough. And then when I do figure it out that I do need to fix it, I don't do it in the correct way. And having both these windows open is not the correct way to do it. If you're going to transfer power, you need to have only one of those windows open, because when I went to transfer the reserve power into the batteries, the two open windows fought each other and no power went anywhere. And before I knew it, we were done. So Langer EVAs, goes ahead and lets the helicopter drop to the surface and then works on getting his parachute. But not after a few tumbles. He's not in any rush anyways. But there is definitely no way that he is going to be able to make it back to his craft, back to his friends. He is going to be stuck out in these meadows for a little bit, so he's going to just find a nice place to land, find a place where he's out in the open so they can see him, they don't run into him, and then he is going to wait for him there. Something happened with my trees. They got real small for some reason, but nonetheless, we pull back, land relatively safely in the grass. He takes a quick moment to hug the ground, happy that he once again survived yet another helicopter. So good job, Langer. So he's quite a bit ways out and a lot closer to the summit than we would have wanted. But it's kind of nice to see this little bit peek out over the clouds to see just how high we got. It's amazing. The records he's breaking right now. He escaped death, but that's not even what makes him so happy. It's the exploration. Alright, so we get our crew back to him. He goes ahead and climbs back up the ladder, and they are now farther away from their initial goal. I mean, at this point, they should have just driven here in the first place, and then he would have had enough electricity to handle everything. But, you know, you live and you learn, or you live at any rate. So we are going to place our waypoint marker at the lake. It's not the glacier lake, but it's close to it, and it'll save us a little bit of driving. However, it is quite a downhill journey from there to here. So thankfully we did manage to survive. There were a couple times when we were worried that it would break, but nothing good enough to really include in the footage. So we'll just show us arriving at the lake, getting across it, because calm waters like that with our engine, we're just taking things nice and easy. Because at this point my stress levels have reached all new heights. And then when I saw that the lake that I was hoping to just travel through to get a nice easy entrance to the Glacier Lake's launch site is filled with glaciers. Who would have thought? And the problem with glaciers is that they have a lot of cracks in their surface, and you can easily hit one of them, break your wheels off, or explode your capsule or anything. So even though I would have loved to drive across them and see the beauty of those ice peaks, they just weren't safe enough for us to do it. So we're going to try to utilize water as much as we can. Water is honestly the safest terrain that we can go on, except for the atmosphere, the air, but flying through the air comes with other challenges. Because as you see here, you don't even have to be going very fast. In fact, sometimes not going fast can mess you up even more, but just the jaggedness of the terrain sometimes gets you. But here we are on the ice shelf, and then we quickly find out that there is a distance between the top of the ice shelf and the sea level. So thankfully we were able to throw on our reaction wheels in time and level ourselves out so we didn't break. However, even if we did break, we are now at the Glacier launch site, so we would be able to fix it anyways, as long as we could have made it there, as long as we don't break our wheels off or our boat engines. But yeah, here we are, Glacier Lake launch site, the first official launch site after leaving the Cove launch site, but the first useful launch site after leaving the KSC. So we're going to go ahead and take care of that and redesign our craft into the Phileas Fogg V5. The two main changes between the Phileas 4 and the Phileas 5 is that the Phileas 5 now only has the one helicopter because trying to have them both fit back there was just too much of a hassle. And then the other factor is that we kept all the changes that we did on the road with putting our command seats in the front and the back, as well as adjusting our headlights. We added some headlights at the bottom of it. There was no way we could keep them. We saved them. I did a couple quick saves and quick loads of our exit off the launch pad, and every single time the headlights broke. So if you do follow this, if you do end up downloading the crafts from Kerbal X, just there might be some tweaks that could be done there. Like those headlights, not necessarily necessary, or you could reposition them, but nonetheless, it wasn't big enough of a deal to restart. I like the new position of the cockpits. Allows for some interesting shots. We are now getting into a more tropical feel. I believe the next launch site is the Volumetric one, and for that we're going to travel part of the way through the ocean to kind of save ourselves some stress of going up and down hills. Somewhere along the lines, we got ourselves a new scientist during one of the refueling missions, and so, but he too was also nervous about traveling in this craft. I don't know what it is. It's something about knowing about science that makes you wary of traveling with a Kerbal pilot. It's not like Kerbal pilots have a bad reputation or anything. It's not like Kerbal pilots have a tendency of putting your life at risk or anything. So it is here where we achieve our top speed over land, and that was 63 meters per second as we just came down that hill. We are losing control and breaking off parts of our vehicle, and everything is seeming like it's going to be a disaster, that this is going to have to be a quick save, quick load sort of situation, but we do a little bit of a breakdance and land on all 6 wheels, throw on our brakes, count our stars, and then realize that everything that we lost is nothing that we need, and we can indeed, as long as we don't lose control having that off-centered fuselage, we can make it to the Volumetric site and just rebuild our craft from there. So we're just going to keep going with that. And before long, we are there. And I do use that term loosely because it was probably about a 2-hour journey between those 2 sites, probably a little bit longer, considering if I look at the map again, I could probably give a better estimate. But between each checkpoint is many multiples of hours. But anyways, here we are at the Boomerang launch site. Nothing really fancy, nothing to write home about. However, I believe this one is very useful for achieving a polar orbit. So that's nice that we unlocked it. As we can see here from the altimetry map, the next continent that we're going to be going through is incredibly mountainous. And I realized that my design was not going to fit. Having a tiny little helicopter was nice. It was easy to include, but in this next leg of the journey, we are going to need something more substantial. So after many more hours of testing, I came up with this, the Phileas Fogg V6. And those solar panels that you see bunched up on the side cost 550 science, which at this point in our journey, we had collected about 600. So we spent all of it on those solar panels alone. But those solar panels alone makes this vehicle possible. If you do get any of the vehicles from Parallax, I recommend this one. Unfortunately, it is fairly high in the tech tree, so it is not a simple craft, but is it a craft? Oh, it is a good craft here. So let's go ahead and kick on our rotors, lift ourselves up into the air very stably, very calmly, safely, serenely. So now the Phileas Fogg is officially an all-terrain vehicle. Before it just had air capabilities, but now it is actually air capable. But the one problem is our electricity goes down very quickly, as you can see from that little circular charge. We're picking our waypoint for NYE Island. I don't know how you pronounce that. I've been calling it New Year's Eve Island. You can't convince me that that's not where Kerbal spend New Year's Eve. Sorry. But anyways, we are back in the engineer's seat looking at all of our different options. Like I mentioned before, this thing is an energy hog. So pretty soon you will see just how much energy we've spent in just that time alone. And look at that. Look how quickly that is going down. And that is because we have 2 extra large rotors up there. 2 of the biggest rotors possible. So we had to, of course, get the biggest solar panels possible. And it's not so much the fact that they're the biggest ones possible, but these ones have the highest charge rate. So that means as long as we have them pointed towards the sun in some capacity, they will be able to charge more than the rotors are using. Currently, we are not facing the sun. As you see here, our angle to it is kind of off. So a downside to it is it does kind of require you to adjust your direction, the direction that you're going, to accommodate sun exposure. However, right here in this moment right now that you're watching is kind of the only time that it really was an issue where the sun was more to like our side than our back. But for the majority of the trip, the sun was either at our back, above us, or at our front. So it was not as much of a problem as it seemed to be. But if you're traveling other places, it is a concern. But as you see here, we are now producing electricity, and we're actually producing it quite quickly. And that's because our solar panels can produce so much faster than our rotors can eat, which means that as long as we have the sun, as long as we have sun exposure of more than 55%, we can stay airborne for as long as we need to. And so this is going to be the leg of the journey where we use our helicopter quite a bit. We're going to spend quite a bit of time in the air. Like I mentioned before, the continent that we're about to go to is primarily made of mountains. And as much as I would love to just, drive across the world, I could, just say, oh, I drove across the world. But in honest, we're going to use everything in our capabilities. And honestly, this is more true to form, more true to the Phileas Fogg nature, because he traveled in a hot air balloon. But that is neither here nor there. We are a helicopter because we are Kerbals. And traveling above the cloud layer is quite relaxing. This was the first time in this entire journey so far that I was able to kind of relax. I was able to kind of breathe, take my hands off the keyboard. I could look at my phone a little bit. I could go do some errands if I needed to. I could handle chores at home, as long as I was back in time to make sure that I didn't run into any mountains or anything, or my solar panels didn't lose their exposure. I had the ability to let the Kerbals kind of pilot themselves, which was really helpful for me as a player, because at this point I was very stressed. This was taking a toll on me as a journey, as a player. Real fast, this helicopter can be a little squirrely to control at first. You'll see me struggling here, kind of flipping around a lot. I would say it's about 60-40 pilot error. The craft is a little squirrely, but once I learned how to control it a lot better, I didn't face these problems that I'm facing right now. I was able to control it. Also, once I put the helicopter blades to control yaw, because I had that turned off initially, but once I had them turned on to yaw, it did level out a lot easier. But you'll see me have a lot better control later, and if you do get this craft from Parallax, just know that it is a little squirrely, but it's not too bad. You can control it pretty easily. But now I'm losing train of thoughts here. Let's just fly through the clouds a little bit. Let's enjoy the journey. I feel like I'm coming with less and less to say on things. You know, we've kind of talked about the basics of it. We've talked about how our Kerbals feel, except for the fact that our scientists now have much better outlooks on things. For some reason, I don't know why, but they felt comfortable flying more than they did driving or boating. But now it is time to head onto the water, because that will give us easier time of travel. As you see there, as soon as we put away our solar panels, we start losing electricity. So it's very important to be very intentional with when you put them back in, because you also don't want them breaking off. They're very delicate, so be careful. This was not the best way to land. Coming in sideways was not a good idea. However, it did work out in my favor, so I'm not going to complain. But all right, yeah, so we shut down our rotor blades. They are no longer running. However, in time warping and with the pushback of the wind as we boat, it will look like they are, and it will sound like they are. But yeah. So now it is just a matter of boating our way to NYE Island. It is the longest stretch of water. It may be the second longest. It's either the longest or the second longest on our journey, but it was quite a long time of just boating in a straight position. Like I mentioned before, our engines are slightly off balance, so it wasn't just a point straight and shoot, just let it get there, because I did have to adjust my directions fairly often to make sure that I was still pointed in the direction that I wanted to go. But here I am deciding I'm going to fly past this, because once we hit this checkpoint, we're going to the other side of the island. And rather than driving across the island, let's just enjoy our newfound flying abilities. Langer was the only one who was able to be airborne up until this point, and so Valentina and Henbrit and definitely Grasky are just loving life in this. I swear, every time I clicked over to Grasky, she was smiling and laughing, and that's even when the rest of the crew were freaking out because we were close to dying, close to blowing up our craft. As you see here, we just barely made it out of a stall, and she just had a smile on her face the whole time. These Kerbals sometimes just can really get you. Yep, so now we got control of our craft, we got our solar panels out, we got the little windows to show us exactly how much charge they're getting at and how much energy they're producing, and then a window on our total battery. As you can see here, we are in the positive, so we have no fears. But yeah, New Year's Eve Island. We have made it. I'm guessing they just set up kind of like an outdoor event with some stages, and that communication dish, obviously relays the video feed to the rest of the world as they ring in the new year. That's my theory. This was a fun journey. This was a fun video to put together. I just had a great old time with this. So here I am adjusting my tail lights. I'll actually make them even better later by having the blue on the left and the brake be the center line. But they're already fixed in the Kerbal file, so you don't have to do that. But it's a great way of having a visual cue when you're not with your HUD on, when you're in cinematic mode. It's very important to know when your RCS or when your reaction wheel and your SAS are on. See, Paduki and put me on the spot. Gradson, I think his name was Gradson Kerman. Both of them happy. They like being in the atmosphere. They like flying. It was funny. Like I mentioned, it was fun seeing Grasky smile all the time. It was also, you would switch over to see them freaking out, and you're like, why are you freaking out? We're barely moving. But, just, they don't like driving. Not much to say here. Just kind of enjoying the storms ahead. It was fun flying through them. Luckily, Blackrack's volumetric clouds do not block the sunlight. If you were to ever make an update to that, where they were collision with the light rays, then this challenge might be next to impossible. But thankfully, we were still able to get full sun exposure, even being in a thunderstorm, so no fear there. But it was a lot of fun flying through the clouds. If you're going to do this challenge, I definitely recommend getting the IVA mods. It's a nice way of breaking up the monotony of just looking at your craft from third-person perspective. Paduki says that we need to climb in altitude. Took me a while. I didn't know what he was trying to get across the entire time while I was filming this, but when I was editing, I'm like, oh, he's saying lift. Get up. Get above the clouds. And he was right. I do want to point out here that the Blackrack's Volumetric Clouds is currently a paid mod, and that is the only visual mod on here that is behind a paywall, but it is definitely worth it. It has reinvigorated my love of the game, and it's, a small price to pay for such an added depth to the journey. But anyways, I'm talking while the sun is setting and my batteries are draining. As you can see in the top right, we only had about a quarter left as we landed. It's important. I mentioned how flying the helicopter allowed me to kind of go do a few other things, or, look at my phone, not pay attention nearly as much. However, it's not fully AFK capable. You do have to land at some point since it's electricity only. So we're going to wait to let the sun rise a little bit. Taking off right at sunrise, right as it cracks, is not the best idea. Your solar panels don't get as much electricity as necessary to keep yourselves from crashing. And honestly, taking off with that little battery as well is very difficult because you won't know if your solar panels can handle it until you get there. But anyways, we are now approaching our next mystery site, the second of 2 mystery sites. They weren't sure what it was, they couldn't quite tell, but they knew something was there, so they told the Kerbals to go there regardless and figure out what it was. Valentine was a little hesitant after the crashed UFO. She never has quite shaken the question of whether or not her crew is who she thinks they are. But she has faith in them. She trusts them. If they're going to turn on her, then not much she can do about it. So now, I mistakenly thought that marker was on the side of the mountain. I thought that it was a lot closer than it was, but then I realized, no, that's just the trick of the eye, because nope, it is currently in that gigantic crater that we would not have been able to travel to if we didn't have flight capability. So once again, pretty happy with my decision to create this thing into a helicopter just by itself rather than having a helicopter attachment, because with the helicopter attachment we still would have been able to make it up over the mountain and into this little crater here, but then only Langer would have been able to see what it is and have to relay it to everybody else. So what's the fun in that? So now they spotted something, just a little marking right where the icon was, and they see that indeed something is there, something worth checking out. So Langer goes into a dive bomb maneuver and tries to get down there as fast as possible. But of course, this is a little bit of a squirrely machine, and getting down there as fast as possible requires a little bit of rocking back and forth. It is pretty efficient at canceling out its momentum, but it is also a bit of a boat, so you gotta make sure you got room to maneuver. This is definitely not the type of craft you're gonna be doing stunts in around the KSC. But now that we are safely on all 6 wheels, once again, we are going to drive our way over. Langer, or actually no, this is Grasky. Grasky is in the front cockpit because she wanted to get eyes on it before anybody else does. And it turns out that this mystery site is a crashed Sputnik. I know. Who'd have thought there was another Kerbal agency out there launching rockets, but apparently someone else tried, and we have proof. So this was a fun little discovery there. I actually enjoyed that one probably the most. That was probably my favorite thing to discover. And it had such high detail too. I was expecting it to be kind of low poly, low res because of how the UFO was, but no, pretty high detail in that. Wonder if the language that was inscribed on it actually means anything, or if it's an actual language, or if it's just inscriptions. Anyways, I was flying over kind of absent-mindedly, and then I realized that I was flying above the Badlands, and I hadn't gotten any science from that just yet. But the moment that I realized I was flying over it, and I decided, I should land, I actually got out of the Badlands. I went to the next biome, so that's why I quickly went backwards to do it, and get all the science that I can. Unfortunately, I'm missing two different experiments, 2 different ground experiments that I was supposed to have. I didn't even notice that for a while, so I'm not even getting all the science that I could get. Wasn't as efficient of a science grab mission as it could have been, but then again, the science was kind of secondary to the exploration. This is KXP after all. So once again, the sun is setting, and we are going to bring ourselves down for a solid touchdown before we lose power. As you can see in the top right, we're already pretty low. I withdrew on my solar panels a little early. I could have left them out for a little bit longer, but nonetheless, we had enough charge to bring ourselves down safely. Did come in at a pretty funky of an angle, though. But with our brakes on, with our lights on, we can see the ground ahead of us. We know that we have safely stopped. However, we have a slight problem. But that's a problem we can deal with in the morning. The desert biome is beautiful. If you get Parallax in here, it's just such a sight to see. So a new day dawns on our heroes, and then they realize that one of the solar panels had broken off during landing. So Zabriskie goes ahead and gets out. It's our first engineering job of the trip. You know, she wasn't trying to be dead weight when she joined on. She wanted to be useful to them as well. So Henbrit lets her take the lead on this. So she goes out, gets her repair kits ready. She goes and takes one and realizes that's not how you repair. So you go ahead and put that back. And then when she goes to click repair for 4 repair kits that she has, it turns out that she is not a high enough level, which is ridiculous because she's been through so much already. So unfortunately, she could not fix the ship. Neither could Henbrit either. So we had to get our hometown hero, Bill Kerbin, out. Get his repair kits in hand, and he will get them back on their way. There he is. Happy to be out of the KSC. Happy to be back on Kerbin, of course, because it was quite a long bit on Minmus. And happy to assist them in any way possible. So with 4 EVA repair kits, we were able to fix that solar panel and once again be on our way. So once more, we're going to take to the skies and head towards our next checkpoint. It's trade-off. It's hard to find a good balance in this challenge between autonomy and manual control. It is a trade-off. By flying, I'm able to take my hands off the keyboard. I can kind of just let the game hold as long as I have a good position. I'm not going to crash. But I can't time warp when I do that. With a helicopter, I cannot time warp. So that means that I have to do the mission in real time. So that's the trade-off that I have. Passing the Harvester Massif. Don't know why it's called that. I'm sure there is a reason somewhere that someone might know. There's a Kerbal Iceberg video that I've been meaning to watch, but just haven't gotten into it yet. So maybe they mention it there. But anyways, like I mentioned, it was around this time in the journey that I was starting to think, I'm like, oh man, I've been flying a lot, flying over a lot of the different terrains and biomes and just kind of skipping it, I'm not running into danger here unless I, don't pay attention. And so I was kind of battling that. I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, oh, well, is that cheating, because you're not driving the whole way. But like I mentioned before, it's not to drive across the country or across the world. It's just to travel across the world. And if I were to be driving, I could time warp to an extent, which means that I could get there faster. So technically, driving would have been faster, but more stressful. And so this is less stressful. However, I had to endure the 1.5, 2 hour long journeys that they said. When it said that it will take 2 hours, I had to strap myself in and just be there for it. And I wasn't fully able to AFK, like I mentioned before. There are certain things I needed to be aware of. So, still stressful. But I definitely recommend finding ways, if you do this challenge, find ways to make certain parts a little bit easier on yourself. You'll be thankful in the long run that you did. Real fast on this craft, the V6, I would recommend tilting the pontoons slightly forward. because I had them slightly forward on previous designs, but at one point I ended up straightening them out here, and that's what's causing that kind of bumping up and down, because the back of the craft will always tilt back down into the water. So if you were to have the pontoons in a more straight horizontal aspect during that time, it will make your travel across the water a lot smoother. It's something that I learned in this that I figured I'd share, because that's the best way. You learn from other people's mistakes. So we are close enough to the shore that I don't want to risk crashing into it. So we're gonna just stay in the water until morning, and then we can continue on our journey. Once again, back into the air. We are quickly coming up to the end of the 2/3 point, and we'll be shortly on our way to the home stretch. So here we are. We're going towards our next checkpoint, and kind of letting the computer handle the autopilot. And we found ourselves a nice pitch and direction. And as you saw there, I very quickly realized I was on an impact course for the side of the mountain. So I had to regain control. And so now over the top of this peak, we have our next checkpoint. And that is another monolith. And another monolith that would have been impossible to drive to. So, but there are places to land here. So like that little peak, little top of that mountain, you could definitely land a VTOL and get your Kerbals out and do that on that monolith that was on the side of the mountain earlier. There was a spot near it that you could land. I mean, we didn't have the capability of, but depending on your craft design, yeah, definitely possible. All right, so now another very, very, very long trip to the next checkpoint, and we're gonna make it there as best we can, and that is gonna be through flight. But it is time for another day to end, and we will be landing, letting the sun come back up, and then starting once again. And see, this is where I wasn't even fathoming that I would have a helicopter craft when I started this journey. Like, I always knew that I would have a tiny helicopter to get to places, but I never even thought about, like, oh, what if I just made the whole thing a helicopter? But it ended up... So I didn't have that idea in mind when I decided the direction that I was going to choose. And I mentioned in the beginning that by going westward for the majority of the journey, we'll have the sun at our backs and we'll get the most amount of daylight. And that became crucial with this design because of the fact that you can only fly when there's enough sun to power it. And if we were flying eastward, we would have the least amount of sunlight on our solar panels at any given day. So it was making me very happy that I took the time to think about the journey beforehand. There was a lot of time spent on prep here. I had to the initial post, the map had all the different points on the map, but that was it. It just had the name of what the place was. So I went and did research, and I looked and I found the coordinates for all of them. But the coordinates came in two different versions. There was one that was based off of degrees and feet and inches on the map, and then some were latitude, longitudes, you know, just two straight up numbers. And even on the wiki, these points came in both versions. Like they couldn't agree on which one they wanted to do. So I went and found a coordinates calculator that converted from one to the other, and I put them all into a latitude longitude version. Those are the coordinates that you see in this video here, and that will potentially be in a document in the description. But yeah, so I had to go through and make sure that I had the correct locations for everything. So anyways, you see here that I had not been paying attention. I was downstairs at the time, and I was walking up the stairs right about here, and I noticed that my craft was passing a mountain. So I quickly jumped back onto the controls, only to see that I had just barely passed my checkpoint. If I had stayed downstairs longer, I probably would have kept going much farther past it. But thankfully, I was able to kind of work my way around. I didn't do as close of a flyby as I had with the other stuff, but I definitely was able to get a screenshot of my craft and the thing together. Yep, once again, another location that you can't drive to. Certainly can't drive to that one. So, an around-the-world challenge like this, you're going to need an all-terrain vehicle. You're going to need something that can fly. You're going to need something that can boat. I guess you don't necessarily need something that can boat if you can get a VTOL, because you can just fly over the ocean. But by making it capable to boat, you save yourself, jet fuel. You save yourself time, because you can, like I mentioned, you can time or physics warp while boating, and it'll say it's a 2-hour journey, but that'll actually end up only taking half an hour. So now the sun is at our back, and we have a full charge of battery. However, we are about to pass over some mountains, and the sun is setting, and so it will very soon set far enough behind the mountains that we will no longer get any charge. So we take the decision, even though we could have kept flying for a little bit longer, maybe stayed above the mountain line, we take the decision to land to make sure we don't risk crashing into the mountainside. And as you can see from the top right, our electric charge is definitely dropping very quickly. And yeah, with only a couple hundred electric charge left, if we hadn't have taken action when we did, we may not have had enough electric charge to land safely. So still, it's safer to fly, but it is still dangerous. This whole journey is one big danger journey, and with Carwin's loss, we is all that more important to make sure everyone gets back home safely. So they have enough exposure. And so we will now be able to continue our flight towards our journey, and the next place that we're going to is the South Pole. There's a mountain in our way. I was thankful that I decided to take a look at it, because it's a high enough mountain that I wanted to climb before getting there. If I had waited until we had gotten to the mountainside and tried to climb, we would have had a lot more of a trouble getting up that way. Something I like to do every now and then was kind of zoom out and really just get a sense of scale of just how small we were compared to these gargantuan peaks. And being able to fly very steadily made for great shots like this. Oh, this was a kind of fun place. This little valley that was enshrouded by clouds. It's not always. The clouds were moving, but I'd like to build a base there. We end up finding another valley like that later, and you get to take another peek at that. But it'd be kind of fun to build like a little outpost in that area and have Kerbals walking around doing science and just clouds passing by them. It was really cool to see the planet in this way because I have ideas for future challenges and future videos that I want to do. There was a river that was very much like the Amazon, very windy, very long, multiple channels, and I think it would be kind of cool to boat up that river. So I might do that at some point, but yeah, maybe a little outpost, a little hanging base or something in that little valley of the mountain, just within the clouds. That'd be kind of cool. But anyways, we are now at the southern ice caps, the tundra, one of those two, the southern Arctic, working our way towards the South Pole. It is quite hilly, which made me glad that I still had plenty of rocket fuel left because of the fact that we could now use electricity to fly. We had a lot less need to use rocket fuel, which means that we had a lot less need to refuel, which has made this part of the journey pretty easy because we're not spending time trying to get refueling crafts out. We can just go. And when it comes to the Arctic, that's all you can do. It's just go. And like that, they go ahead and reach the South Pole, drove right on past it, so they're going to have to hit the brakes and turn around. They will, however, they will need fuel. And so they're going to call on Jeb and Bill once more to meet them. Jeb and Bill weren't too far off. They knew that would probably be the case, but after seeing Valentina's rage at the North Pole, they certainly weren't going to meet them there. We get some graphical issues. I'm not sure why, but it seemed to happen, or I'm not sure which mod did this, but it seemed to happen when I had two crafts that had lights on at the same time. As you'll see in the next shot, I turned the light off on this craft here, and that graphical glitch went away. Yeah, Bill and Jeb face to face with Valentina, Henbrit, Poduki, and Grasky. In most of my videos, I can never remember the names of the Kerbals, but I spent so much time with this crew, and it's just they're like friends of mine now. You know, we got to get them home safely. We can't lose any of these people. So Valentina once again climbs aboard. The engineers and the scientists will also create another laboratory out here on the South Pole. Just a matter of setting down machines, nothing too important. But with that, Jeb and Bill say goodbye, and they travel on. They did refuel at one point, but I just skipped ahead of that. The refueling is not the interesting part, it's the journey. It's not about the refuel, it's about the journey. But anyways, we are now leaving the southern ice shelf in the only way that we can, with a plummet and a save. I did do a couple tests of the best ways to get off that shelf, and let me tell you, there is no good way of getting off that shelf. So we took to the air and just set down in the water when we could. We've traveled through the night, but eventually got close enough to land that we didn't want to hit it by accident, so we just waited until morning to approach. We are now coming up on the Mahi Mahi launch site. Another one of the making history launch sites, but not one that you can unlock right from the beginning. most of these launch sites you can't use right off the bat in stock Kerbal or Breaking Ground Kerbal. Yeah, they do require you to discover them, to explore. You can, send a rocket here or send a plane or whatever, but you actually have to be close enough to it to unlock it. But this site is actually pretty good. It seems like it'd be a pretty good site for a craft like this, something that can drive from land and then head to the water, because it was a nice smooth transition. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's actually get to the launch site first. There you are. More interesting than than some of the other launch sites we've been to. More to look at. Just the fact that there's little hangar bays there. There's a little fuel tanker here. It was fun. And the tropical aspect, the fact that there was a storm brewing offshore, just really added to it. By this time in the journey, I'm starting to feel a lot better. I am reinvigorated. We are on the last third of our journey, and the end is in sight. We are going to do another redesign. We are going to now make the Phileas V7, which is essentially the V6, but with a minicopter attached to the top. I did quite a bit of testing, and quite a bit of flying, and tweaking and rearranging and trying to get it just right, and I could have sworn that I did, but I would not recommend using this craft. If any of my crafts are up on Kerbal X, they're all going to be on Kerbal X, so this will be available. However, it is the hardest to fly. It is the hardest to pilot. The helicopter, the minicopter itself is not set up right. The big copter is set up right, but just hard to control. Something's up. I don't know what it was. Through all my testing, I could never get it to fix right. Oh yeah, and once again, I forgot to tilt down those pontoons, so there's going to be a little bit of wobbly on the water. But yeah, I don't know what it was. It was hard to control, and if you can manage to get it work, more power to you. So I'll leave it there. But I'd stay with the 6. I wanted to pause here. This was a fun little island that I found in this little area. I had thought about potentially like building a small house craft and make it look like a front porch and everything with a little chair there, and I thought about putting a Kerbal there, but honestly I had spent so much time at this point that fun little idea was just too daunting of a task. Then I also have to spend quite a bit of time designing a house. And this is a program about space frogs. It's been a long voiceover. I think I might take a little bit more of a backseat to the footage for now as we drive through the desert and we discover more along our journey. This was a fun little ride. I enjoyed driving again. It had been a lot of flying, and the footage of just cruising through the desert was fun to go through. Here I am trying to fix whatever problems I had with the helicopter to no avail. I'm gonna fly some more, but it is going to be a struggle. Yeah, everything seems right. Like, I don't understand why. It's like my reaction wheel decided that it didn't want to be working anymore. But the reaction wheel is definitely on. Everything is balanced. Like, the rotors are in the center of mass. The minicopter is in the center of the rotors. They're not fighting each other. Theoretically, this should be a decent helicopter, and it just wasn't. I don't know why. But, you live and you learn. Where you live. very wobbly. No matter what I did. Like earlier when we were first piloting the V6, I was like, you know, oh, it's very squirrely. It took me some time to learn. A lot of what you're seeing is, you know, piloting error. This was not that case. This was absolutely fighting me. There was no way that I could just let it cruise. There was no direction that I could just be like, hold this direction and safely fly that direction, because there was just, I had to be on it the whole time. So the whole reason why I created the V7, why I added the mini helicopter onto it, is at the next location I wanted to utilize a small copter as well, and then but still be able to have the helicopter capabilities of the V6. You know, I wanted to just have my cake and eat it too. So that's why I designed it this way. But by this point, I'm already desperate for another launch site, because I'm like, you know what, the V6 was fine. We don't need a mini helicopter. It's just more trouble than it's worth. So this was, you know, probably about another half hour, 45-minute journey of fighting a helicopter. But we officially made it, so, you know, it worked out. It was worthwhile, worth the struggle. We are now at the desert pyramids. And we come down quickly, but we come down safely. And we are at the... You know, I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce it. You can go ahead and read that there. But we are at the pyramids. And my goal for this little mini-copter is to land it on top of the pyramid. On top of the center one. Which, you know, sounds easy enough. It's not that tall. It's not that grand of a structure. Or it's not that far that we're going. But like I mentioned, the V7 just... something's up with it. So I'm trying to rotate myself to face towards it, and I just don't have yaw control. Which doesn't make sense, because my helicopter blades were set to have yaw control. My reaction wheel was also set to have yaw control. So even if my helicopter blades couldn't do it, the reaction wheel should have been able to. If you look at Longer's face down on the right-hand side, you'll see even he is... a little nervous about this particular flight. So because I didn't have any yaw control, there was no way of controlling which direction I was actually turning myself, and before I knew it, I was out of control. Langer, Kerbin once again in danger. But once again, proven that he is a true test pilot. Jean-Paul Stapp would be proud. But the goal of getting that helicopter on top is not going to happen. And good night. Longer gives it a nice salute and then heads back to the rest of them. And they're just going to get on out of here. There's no point in planting a flag, but they're definitely going to take some reports for the historians back home. So now we have the next place to go is a desert launch site, which is very close to this, actually. It's very close, and so we only have to struggle with this helicopter for a few dozen kilometers, and then we can... It's another launch site that we're about to reach, so that means that we can go ahead and replace this with the V6 once more, because honestly that was the perfect craft. There was nothing that I needed to improve upon with that. So there we are. We can spot the launch site and airstrip. We've got plenty of sun, so we're in no danger of running out of electrical charge. The only danger we're in is piloting. We got to make sure that we can land this safely. It does have parachutes, so you know, worst case scenario, we can always opt for a parachuted landing. This thing builds up quite a bit of speed when you come down this way. My top speed here ended up being about 80 meters per second. So, yeah, that pulled in the record for the top airspeed was on this descent. I actually probably was on the descent for the crash Sputnik. Now that I think about it, I think we went faster there, but so it might have actually been higher than 80 meters per second. Nonetheless, that's what we're going to call it because that's the highest that I actually got eyes on. So we bring our craft up onto the launch pad and go ahead and reload a V6. We change the lights around, give it a little bit more lighting, give it a few more batteries and such, but other than that, no real changes to it. And so with that, we are now going to head west from the desert. We've got just a few more checkpoints to go, and then we can head home. So we point ourselves at our target and set out on, once again, another long journey. Very mountainous in this area. It would have been very difficult to cross. The desert's pretty easy to cross on by wheels, but this area, not so much. You're going to need a lot more rocket engines. If you want to do this with a more driving focused vehicle, I would recommend bigger wheels. I really enjoyed the Lynx series of the Rover. It worked out very well, but if you're going to design something with a little heftier wheels, maybe a stronger motor on it, because if I could have gotten more thrust, just as a standard motor power flatland top speed, I was only getting like 21 to 23 meters per second. So if you were to be able to get more power out of those wheels, you could probably do a lot more of this just by driving. However, it is, once again, it is very stressful driving this entire way because you build up too much speed, you build up too much of an angle, you end up flipping, you can explode, break pieces off, kill Kerbals. And, you know, you can do like I do with the quick saves, you know, and that's fine. But as I realize is that you got to place your quick saves pretty frequently because you can make a whole bunch of progress and then blow yourself up and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll go back to the quick save. And then you realize it's like I was like 20 kilometers back and now I have to drive 20 kilometers again. So it just adds to not just the stress, but the time that it takes to get there, your own personal, as a player. This was an endurance challenge as a player. To be very fair, this was intense struggle. You know, a lot of time and effort and energy and just mental capacity went into this challenge, and so definitely recommend keeping that in mind and trying to make it so, you know, you find a nice crossroads of having the most amount of fun, but also, you know, not having the most amount of fun, enjoying a challenge for challenge sake, but also, you know, taking care of yourself and not ruining your own mental health for a game. We are now passing over the giant crater, and we could technically drift a little bit more to the right and hit one of our checkpoints before going to the checkpoint that we're currently going to. However, that puts us in a different trajectory, and that would make it so that our lines cross. And even though that's not part of the rule or anything, I decided I didn't want that. We're just going to keep going in the order that we had them set in, and keep the shape of the initial design. See, as you see on the map right there, we have a checkpoint to the right of us. There's 2 in this general area, so. Yeah, it's just Not too much to say. I mean, we kind of covered a lot of what's going on here. Now it's just a matter of getting through to the end, seeing all the different parts, and keeping everyone alive. So I'll take a second and ask this. What was your favorite part of this journey so far? Do you have a favorite biome? Which one looked the coolest? Which one would you consider building a little outpost or base upon? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I'm just happy to be done with this. This was such an ordeal, but it was so fun putting it together, doing the challenge, and I'm so excited to share with y'all that, like, honestly, right now I don't even know what to say, you know? I'm just happy. Flying through the storm, once again, thankful that the clouds don't interfere with our sunlight. Unfortunately, the sound of the rain hitting the cabin wasn't as pronounced when we have the helicopter blades running. It's best when driving. So this is the center of a crater with, you know, the remnants of a giant asteroid, I'd imagine. Sort of little island thing. I did not fly over the entirety of the crater. Like, if I was doing just a straight up, like, oh, let's just check out cool things on Kerbin, then that would probably be part of it. It'd be like, you know, fly around the ring of the crater. But, so there's more to discover. There's actually another crater in the north of the main continent, I believe. Maybe mistaken. But there's one that's not even on this list at all that is like, oh no, that's definitely something cool to look at. Like, that could be considered. But it's not an anomaly, so it's not found on KerbNet, so it's not part of the list. But I just bring that up to show you that there's so much more that even than I covered. So I just swing by the crater launch site. I don't bother landing on it. There's no need. I'm not going to change my design. There's no refueling necessary. And there wasn't really a great place to land, so I just went with a flyby. And then went back into the water until I can head towards the next checkpoint. I did have to wait overnight because it was just too far into it. I didn't want to lose electricity on my way to the mountain, and I certainly didn't want to lose electricity after coming over the top of the mountain, so it's just best to wait till daytime. Just climbing in the mountain, just trying to get above the location. I meant to hit screenshot and I accidentally pressed the action group that deployed our solar panel, so I freaked out there a little bit thinking I was about to ruin things, but thankfully I didn't. Our solar panels aren't facing the sun right now, so we have to be very quick about this little pass by, because we are technically losing power right now. And with this pass, we have one more communication satellite dish in the bag. The crater rim has been discovered. And now we can start heading eastward, officially on a homewards trajectory. We've got one more site to visit here on this continent. And then we have one more site to visit on the following continent, and then we're done. Thank you so much. If you're hearing this and you've watched this far, obviously, you know, you've been on this whole journey with me. Thank you so much. This has been I know this is long. This is a whole movie, basically 2.5 hours. You know, there should be a bathroom break at some point, but you know, that's what the pause button's for. But yeah, thank you so much for following along. Thank you for supporting the channel. You know, if you're a subscriber, thank you for that. If you're not a subscriber, maybe check it out. Consider it. We do a lot of Kerbal stuff. This next month is going to be something a little bit different, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But here we are at the... I'll pronounce it when the word comes back on screen, because it's not the best. But according to lore reasons, just according to the lore, this is the first site of the Kerbal Space Program. It's an abandoned site, as you can see here. But once we have been here, we can now unlock it to launch our crafts from, I believe... It might actually just be a site. No, that looks like a launch tower right there. Baker Banur, that's right. Yeah, I didn't want to try to attempt that just off the top of my head. But Baker Banur, the first site of the KSC. I just want to point out that fall right there was not intentional. That was because we ran out of battery in that exact moment. Which means that if I had been any higher than I was at that very moment, it would have been a bad day, which everyone would have been unhappy with that result. So, and by this point in the journey, I have been doing this for over 75 hours. No, over 80 hours at this point. And so my tolerance for things going wrong is getting smaller and smaller. And I'm like, I can see the end in sight. It's just, we're almost there. I just gotta get there. These Kerbals are less my friends now and just more of the things that I'm transporting from point A to point B. I'm in it to win it. And we gotta win. So I got my master alarm going off. I'm not really sure what that is from at the time, but I believe that is from my altitude warning at the engineer's desk in the back. There's a switch where you can turn on your altitude warning, and I think that's where that came from. But nonetheless, it's not a problem. It's nothing we have to worry about. I do like flying through these trees, and once again, if the Parallax trees had collision, this would probably be an impossible task, but thankfully we can fly right through them. So beautiful. Parallax 2.0 is such a beautiful visual mod. I do want to say that if you feel like you can't run it, take another look at the configuration file, because there are certain things you can adjust in there to make it run a little bit more smoothly. I was able to get Parallax to run on my old computer, which was absolutely not made for any kind of graphical anything. And that's because I went into the configuration file and I turned down the amount of scatter. The default is 1.0, but even at 0.3, there's still quite a large amount of scatter. Like, it's not like, oh, well, if I turn it down, then there's only going to be like a tree here and a tree there. No, there's still plenty of trees at 0.3. So if you want to run Parallax and you feel like, oh no, I can't, you know, my computer's not very good with mods, just try turning down the amount of scatter and you may find much better performance. Yeah, I had an integrated 580. So if you have anything higher than that, you should be fine. But I'm taking a peek over here at my electricity, and you can see that I am no longer in view of the sun, or the sun is far enough down behind me that is no longer powerful enough to power my solar panels. I'm not going to notice that for a while. I'm sitting here, I'm hanging out, I'm checking, you know, my phone, looking at YouTube, just having a good old time while I fly across very treacherous mountainous area. And it's about this point that I realize, look at all that energy I wasted. I could have been taking evasive maneuvers, but that is neither here nor there. And I had no quick save to speak of, so I just desperately tried whatever I could. I don't want to land in the mountains because there's a very real chance that I could end up tumbling down the side of it without any kind of control. So I'm hoping to land in that little valley below, but it is soon going to be clear that I will not have the electricity for that. And with that, my blade seize up, stop running, and we start dropping like a stone. Thankfully, I put parachutes on here because when I turned this whole thing into a helicopter, I realized that this would probably be a possibility at some point. And if nothing else, let's just have parachutes on the entire craft itself. So we're going to turn our lights on so that way we can see the ground coming up below us. Nothing we can do to stop it, but, you know, we can see our demise coming. But thankfully, we touched down softly enough, and we're actually in a relatively flat area. We have no fear of falling down the hill because we're not even facing the hill. So anyways, let's go ahead and time warp to the morning. Once again, under full sun coverage, we got a nice hazy takeoff because we are high enough that the clouds are kind of wisping in through us and around us. My altitude, my helicopter blade direction was tied to my main throttle, which is also tied to my rocket engines, which is why we kept firing our rocket engines when we were trying to lift ourselves. So that's what that's about. Once again, above the clouds, and just a glorious day. Don't have a lot of charge, but as we can see here, our charge is rising, so our solar panels are in full view of the sun, and since it's morning time, we'll be able to fly for quite a long time. It's not always a smart idea to take off with such little battery built up already. Actually, let me rephrase that. It's not a smart idea to do that because you're not going to know if your solar panels are going to produce enough electricity until you're up in the air and they're out and they're facing where they need to face. But by that point, if they're not producing enough electricity, you need to make the choice to come back down quickly. You need to quickly make that choice because you don't have enough battery. So if you are going to pilot this, just be wary of early morning takeoffs. Make sure that you have plenty of battery to recover if you don't have enough solar power. But we are now passing through that second valley I told you about earlier, that there was another valley where the clouds kind of encapsulate you. And this also would be a nice, fun place to make like a little science base. So now we are at the end of our journey on this continent. All we now have to do is make it back to the continent that Kerbin, that the KSC is on. And then once we do that, we have one more checkpoint, and then it's home. And after a long flight over the ocean, we approach the continent once more. We will need a refueling mission once we get there, because our oxidizer and liquid fuel is very low, as well as our electric charge, because the sun is setting. I wasn't able to land this very easily on several occasions, because I was way too high in the air, and we just did not have enough electrical charge to manage the whole way down. But I did manage on the third attempt to figure out that the best way to do it is to just simply plummet like a stone, utilize whatever electricity that we have available, and kick on our engine when we're much, much lower in the altitude. In fact, I probably should have done it even lower than this. Because as you see here, our electricity is now rapidly dropping, and we are still dangerously high above the ocean. I let it go and bend up to kind of slow down, and I come in for my second pass, but run out of electricity. And thankfully didn't explode on contact. There have been a couple times in this journey where I just thank the Kerbal stars that we all made it safe. So now I only have a little bit of rocket fuel left, and I'm gonna need it to get out of the water. And as you see here, I run out of it just on the shoreline, but through the cunning use of backing up and going forward through angles, we managed to climb our way up the hill and meet up with the refueling craft. Solid connection. For the last leg of the journey, we're gonna fly over the mountainous areas, but once we get into the highlands beyond that, we'll probably end up just driving the whole way back. So we're gonna need a full tank of gas because those rocket engines are gonna propel us forward. But that being said, the stakes have never been higher. This time is now the most important of them all, because we have gone through that whole journey, but it will all be for naught if we can't get the Kerbals home safely. And as we ascend the mountain, we come up to our final checkpoint of the journey, monolith number 4. And that would have been quite a challenge if we had gone the other way around. But thankfully, we were able to see it in clear view because it was right in front of us. So after climbing that mountain, we come on to the other side, down into the highlands, and we are going to ride the rest of the way that on wheels. The stakes have never been higher, but I have also never been more impatient in this entire journey. Need to kill my Cal controller so that way I can use my rocket engines without ascending. And then we are just going to do the entire home stretch on a single run. I am booking it for home. This is the finish line, people. I only made one checkpoint, or one quick save that entire time. The rest of it I was just praying and relying on my piloting skills to make sure that we kept ourselves stable. And then after we crest a particular hill, we can get eyes on our prize. It is no longer a fearful rush to the end, but a joyous lap of victory. Everyone realizes they hadn't really thought about it, but they all realize that they are now about to get their picture taken. They are the first Kerbals in Kerbal history to travel to every single one of the points of interest, launch sites, and anomalies on the Kerbal planet. There is a 5th monument that is randomized with every new playthrough, and we did not get that, but maybe at another time we'll figure that out. Let's just take one last look to appreciate the journey that we just went on. This entire expedition, all because of a single challenge that we found online, and I was really excited to complete it. I thought that this was a whole lot of fun. I think we'll be able to do some cool things springboarded off of this. Like I mentioned, there was a river mission that I'd be interested in, as well as maybe playing around with more helicopter stuff. But we will be figuring that out in subsequent episodes. So for now, I want to thank you all for watching this far. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. Everyone that came to the premiere, if anyone did come to the premiere, thank you guys as well. It's been a lot of fun. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I'm trying to make my way to the next YouTube checkpoint in our journey. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.